You're welcome back to Breakfast Central. Now, our focus is on one of the most politically charged stories out of Nigeria's National Assembly. After 6 months of suspension, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has officially resumed legislative duties. Let's rewind. Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan, representing Kogi Central, was suspended in March 2025 after protesting the reassignment of a Senate seat by President of the Senate Godswill Akpabio.
She called the move unjust, and what followed was a 6-month political standoff, legal battles, and what she describes as blackmail and intimidation. Now, her office has been unsealed. She's back in the Red Chamber, and she's not holding back. She says, and I quote, "I owe no apology to anybody for the wrong done to me." Joining us for these discussions are gender and politics researcher Chiamaka Okafor, and much later we'll have Peter Akah joining us. As a human rights activist that has followed this story closely. Good morning, and thank you very much, Chiamaka, for joining us this morning. The reinstatement or the return of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan to her office as a senator representing Kogi Central, what would you say that this means to you?
Good morning, Olive, and thank you for having me on the show this morning. So the return of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan is a show of resilience for me, first of all, and also a very welcome development. I mean, justice can be delayed, but can be denied. Although the conditions around the reopening of her office is not exactly clear, because as at the last time I checked to see if NAS had put out any information or statement about why her office was opened, after a few days of saying you are not allowed to resume here, and then we find that they are opening her office. First of all, like I said, show of resilience, a welcome development, and we our fingers crossed looking at the coming days and what NAS is going to say. But just to say that her statement about saying I won't offer an apology, or she doesn't have any words for apology, is really strong, and I admire that a lot.
Now, we've seen the back and forth that happened between the leadership of the Senate and Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan all through the 6 months court cases here and there. What, do you think a resumption has put an end to this episode and all parties can go about their business, or there's still issues that needs to be ironed out?
Of course, as we can see, there's still issues that need to be ironed out, and this is beyond, a NAS versus Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan issue. Perhaps, like a lot of us have observed, this is a personal issue between the Senate President and the Senator representing Kogi Central. So beyond the resumption and opening of office, we will still see some heated moments between them in the chambers, for example, and perhaps things like, changing committees and all of the things we've seen, the whole back and forth. And mind you, there's still a case in courts, which NAS held on to a few days ago, saying this is why you cannot resume until perhaps pressure was mounted on them to say, this case, the issue of her suspension, she's stayed through this suspension and it's elapsed. So you can't hold on to that as a reason for her not to resume her activities as a serving senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So yes, of course, we'll see in the coming days how things will unfold. But one thing I know is that the issues between the senator and the Senate President is not done yet. And mind you, there's a case of sexual harassment that has never been addressed. And I'm sure that Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan will bring that up again, because this is a concrete issue and should be addressed. It shouldn't be swept under the carpet. And if you do that, then you ask questions. If such a gross allegation or accusation made by a senator of the Federal Republic against another senator who is the Senate President is ignored and treated as if it never existed in the first place, what will happen to young girls, younger women aspiring to political positions who have to experience this? Where do they go for recourse or for justice? So the issues, like Gen Z say, is plenty, and we're yet to see them.
When we look at what has happened to Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, being one of 4 female senators out of 109 senators in the 10th Assembly, it then brings again conversations about 35% affirmative action and the role of female representation in politics. What do you perceive might be how this will impact women's willingness to show up and be involved in the process, especially when some would raise the fact that the other female senators in the House did not throw their weight behind Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan?
I mean, this is a systemic problem we've seen over time. And you just said there are only 4 women out of 109 senators in the Senate. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. There are 469 seats at the National Assembly, and there are just 20 women out of 469. That tells a deeper, bigger, and even an indicting story on what our representative democracy looks like. How that impacts women is that, first of all, a very simple example to give would be when you look at your screen or you look at this data and you don't see anyone who looks like you automatically tell yourself, this is not a place for me. And that's what it does to younger girls, for example, because children, for example, the things they see on their screens, on TV, on social media, for example, are the kind of things they think they can do. And so if as a child, a girl child, I'm looking at television and all the pictures of political leaders I'm seeing are men, 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 I automatically start to tell myself that women are not supposed to be here. That's what it does to young girls, for example. And what does it do to women, young ladies aspiring to political position, and how we've seen all this thing unfold, that she didn't get support from other females in the house? It's a culture of silence that we have been socialized into. So don't challenge men, don't get into certain conversations. Politics is not exactly for women. So if you come into politics, you have to be subservient, you have to behave in a certain way. And like the senator from, I think, East Africa, the parliamentarian from East Africa, who says good girls get the corner office. And that's what happens. You're boxed into a corner. You can't do anything outside what you are permitted to do by the powers that be. This is discouraging for any democracy, especially ours, as young as our democracy is, and all the potentials it has. Women are about 50% of the Nigerian population, and perhaps even more of the voting population, and yet it's not seen in the numbers, it's not seen in the representation. So how do you then encourage more people to come into politics? How do we achieve 35% of the affirmative action? How does Nigeria get political parity? The World Economic Forum Gender Gap Report shows that it will take another 123 years to achieve gender parity, but also another 162 years to achieve political parity. And in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria has experienced the most regression when it comes to political representation. This tells a lot of story. According to Invictus Africa's report for 2024, Nigeria ranks 24 out of 24 countries that it looked at. Our representation is poor, it's terrible for want of a better word, and it doesn't reflect the realities. So if you don't know Nigeria and you're trying to tell Nigeria from its representation, are there only 20 women? So out of 469 and there are 20, does it say that we have fewer women in Nigeria than we have men? That's not the truth. So in a nutshell, It tells younger people that this is not a space for you, do not come in.
Now, Chiamaka, let's track back a bit and look at the genesis and how all of this played out. Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan is not the first senator to be suspended from the National Assembly, but she has a record for being the senator that spent the longest time in suspension. There's been issues with Senator Dino Melaye, Senator Ovie Magege, and they had their way of resolving these issues. It didn't drag for this long. Do you think her gender, being a woman, Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan's gender, played a role in the way this has panned out? What does her ordeal reveal about the space for outspoken female politicians in Nigeria?
You said it yourself, definitely. The playing field is not equal for male and female or for men and women here. I mean, it's perhaps the same thing everywhere, but it's even worse here, So you look at the cases of Senator Alain Dume, Senator Omagike in the time they were suspended, and how this was, resolved in less than 3 weeks. They were suspended for 90 days, but they went to court and the court nullified their suspension. And in the case of Senator Omagige, the court said it was constitutionally defective. And even the government at the time was asking the court to declare his suspension unlawful. Are we seeing that today? We all know the answer. In the case of Senator Alain Dume, the court also declared it illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional. We haven't seen these terms being used in the case of Senator Natasha. The best we've seen is the court saying it's excessive and then turning down to advice, not order. that, the Senate reconsiders its decision on suspending Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. This is double standards at its best. It's the same court, it's the same judicial system that people run to for succor. And then a female senator is running to the court to say XYZ, and the court isn't doing the same thing it did when her male colleagues had the same issue and ran to court. It was resolved very quickly, but in her case, we're not seeing the same thing. If anything, we're seeing a shared disrespect of the court. Now, remember that Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan initially approached the court when she sensed that there was going to be a suspension and prayed the court to hold or order the Senate not to suspend her. What happened to that order even after it was given? The Senate disregarded that order. What do we call that? Contempt of court? No. And then we saw that happen. And even against the fact that, the judge suspended and said she's advising. But this has been declared excessive. If we were people who respected our judicial system and wanted it to get better, once the court has made the decision, we should have gotten in, right? And say, okay, let's settle this amicably. Let's do this way. We can't suspend a senator. And this is literally you saying, people of Kogi Central, you do not deserve representation and you can't have it. So clearly, the playing field is not leveled. It's different treatment for men and women. And I guess women have to get hit harder than their male counterpart. The reasons best known to the system. But this is systemic segregation, systemic sexism. Just give it whatever name, this is what it is. But one thing that is clear is that this is systemic. And we've seen a trend in all of these suspensions, if I may mention, that once you speak against the powers that be, in the case of Aline Dume, Omar Gege, and Akpoti-Uduaghan, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, we see that they have faced backlash because they challenged the system. Aline Dume was suspended for a statement he made about looking at allegation of misappropriation to the leadership of the Senate at the time.
Right.
Omar Gege too was had the same issue because he said the Senate was plotting to unseat the president at the time. And he brought his colleagues into disrepute. All of these things are trying to see that once you decide to be strong and have opinions that are different from the general opinions, you become a target. This is what we're seeing.
We unfortunately, this is still an ongoing story. It feels like one leg of the battle has been won. But let's now bring in another person who was there yesterday to witness this. He's been at the forefront of championing for the return of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. I'm talking about Peter Akah. Good morning, Peter. Thank you very much for joining us this morning on Breakfast Central.
Good morning, Olive. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
I guess it's safe to say congratulations. All your effort has paid off. We saw you arriving in Abuja with your mattress and your Ghana must go back saying, we sleep here today if nothing happens. So detail, chronicle for us what the journey was like, especially what happened yesterday leading up until the unsealing of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan's office.
Olive, let me begin by saying it is unfortunate that Nigeria is where it is today. That for 6 months, a National Assembly that should be the symbol of democracy, that should uphold the rule of law, has become an institution that has been dragged into controversies of high-handedness, legislative recklessness, and instead of dealing with issues that are very, very pertinent to Nigerians, issues of insecurity, where bandits are holding press conferences in Katsina, of hunger and inflation, this 10th National Assembly will go home with the reward or the achievement of being probably the most unproductive National Assembly in the history of Parliament, with just only the capacity to approve loans and loans without investigation for the president while fighting political enemies. The entire story of Senator Natasha has been a tragedy from the beginning. It is unfortunate that out of a Senate of 109 senators, only 4 women and one of them has been made to undergo this level of persecution and gross violations of a person's rights. So, of course, we were supposed to, that Senator Natasha's suspension had ended as at the beginning of September, and she wrote a letter in August duly informing the National Assembly that with the definite expiration of the 6 months, suspension, she is expected, according to Senate resolutions and even according to law, to resume her job because the suspension was not indefinite, it was for 6 months. So whatever that was in court will be an academic exercise and she will have to resume. The clerk of the House wrote a letter dated on the 4th of September responding to Senator Natasha, telling her that he had instructions not to unseal her office and that until the Senate reaches a resolution, because the issue she's talking about is still pending in a court. The same court which the Senate flouted its orders in the first place, where the court had even decided that I find this, a suspension excessive and overreaching, and it does not permit the senator, it makes her breach the provisions of Section 63 of the Constitution. And then suddenly, when the National Assembly saw that Nigerians were mobilizing, Nigerians were prepared to ensure, the people of Kogi Central and Nigerians were prepared to ensure that their senator, the distinguished Senator Natasha, must resume office and plenary. The Senate decided to hurry and move forward, and by 2 a.m. midnight, the clerk of the Senate decided to begin to send messages saying that I now have the instruction to unseal your office. And for the first time in the history of the Senate, unsealing of a suspended senator's office was done on camera, recorded and given to bloggers to post. This is where Nigeria is today. That is the precedence that was set. And so we went there. And then suddenly by midnight, there was a message to move the resumption of the Senate from yesterday to the 7th of October. And guess who signed that motion to move it? It is the chief of staff to the Senate President and not the clerk of the House. Olive, across board, it has been a violation of rights. It has been a complete show of shame. But we are glad that we are where we are, because the people of Kogi Central and Nigerians have resolved that this injustice will not be sustained. And come 7th of October, which the Senate has moved to, Senator Natasha will not walk alone. And we must ensure that there are no more calisthenics or theatrics to this. The resumption will be without any further conditions. Her 6-month suspension is ended. She's a distinguished senator. She must begin to resume and work for the people of Kogi Central. And that is how we got to where we went to yesterday.
To look at, holistically looking at, but before I ask my question, Peter, we have to go on a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. Do stay with us.
Well, the obvious answers are a denial of rights to representation and to governance under a so-called democracy. But unfortunately, it has become almost the hallmark of what this current government, both from the executive and legislative arms, will be remembered for. Recall that just a few days ago, there have also been a resumption of sitting governor in Rivers State, who was also suspended, a democratically elected governor suspended by the president. So while there is executive rascality, there is legislative rascality. And in the case of the Rivers State governor, for 61 days or 6 months, the Supreme Court was unable to hear a suit that was taken there by the PDP governors. But of course, they reached an alleged peace deal that has seen the governor come back. But we are grateful to Senator Natasha and to the resolve that he has, that it doesn't matter the pressure you are put under, you must stand for what is right and just, and let the system be put on trial. For 6 months, the people of Kogi Central have not had their senator. Nobody knows exactly what is being inserted in the budget or taken out as it reflects or regards to their constituency projects and what the constituents are supposed to get directly from the National Assembly. So in terms of human capacity development, in terms of representation in government, the same way the people of Rivers State were shortchanged, the same way the people of Kogi Central are shortchanged. And this is going on. This brazen attack on democracy is going on with the full watchful eyes of the judiciary, and is carried out by an institution that is supposed to be a body of lawmakers who should be ready to uphold the law and entrench a culture of due process and the rule of law. So across board, it is unfortunate, it is reprehensible.
There seems to have been a disconnection there with the internet connection with Peter Akah. Chiamaka, I'll bring you in. What do you think may have changed between the last time when Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan had sent in a notice that she was about to resume, and when they clearly, of course, prevented her from resumption? And yesterday, what do you think has changed between this time frame? And that's the question I'm hoping Peter can also help give some clarity to, seeing as he's been directly involved. Well, let's hear from you.
I mean, this is a question I was asking myself yesterday, and hearing Peter say that the instruction to open her office came at 2 a.m., it's a sign that there was pepper or pressure somewhere coming. And when I read the NBA's statement on preventing her from resumption, when she wrote her letter, I think on September 4th, it was applaudable for the NBA to make that statement to say, do not do this, because it's a clear, I mean, you see a consistent misinterpretation of the laws of the country and the Constitution. So what may have happened between that space is still unclear to me, but one thing I know is that there was pressure somewhere for the Senate to reopen her office, because it's clear that you cannot hold on to a sub judice case as a reason for her not to resume, because the suspension you sent her on had expired. So what would be the case? The case in court was to decide if her suspension was illegal or not if she was going to go on suspension, and she's gone on suspension and she stayed through it and she's back, and you still prevent her from resuming. I mean, the impunity keeps getting better and better in quotes by the day. And this is a shame, for want of a better word. Like Peter said, it's an utter show of shame. It's disgraceful that for the giant of Africa, Big Brother Africa, this is where we are as a people, as a nation, and we keep screaming, our democracy is growing, it's getting better. And just to quickly correct the figures I gave earlier, according to Invictus Africa 2024, Nigeria ranked 46 out of 46 African countries that was reviewed for women's representation on the continent. That is telling. It is really telling of what we are as a people. So I do not have the exact a great response, but I think there was pressure in that space.
I mean, from our discussion this morning, and also the statistics you've reeled out, it will take a lot. Now, Chiamaka, as we inch towards 2027, a lot of women, ambitious women, who want to throw their hat into the political arena.
Hopefully.
I believe, hopefully, and believe that, if I'm not mistaken, you said in order to achieve gender parity, with the pace at which we're going, it will take 162 years. I'm sure all of us on this screen right now will not be alive in 162 years to witness that happen naturally. What do we need to do as a people to hasten, to fast track this and hasten gender parity? Or do we need affirmative action? Or perhaps Paul Kagame? I don't know. You're the expert
well, just
in this
quickly
field.
correct that 1 to 2 years for political parity. Gender parity will take 1 to 3 years.
Political
and this
parity.
is on a global scale.
Yeah, political
this
parity.
This on a global scale, exactly. On a national scale, perhaps we need 300 years or more to get this done. What do we need to do? Nigeria is a country that is, for want of a better word, cursed with great policies. We have great policies in place. There's a national gender thing going on. We have affirmative action, a lot of things happening. The current gender bills that we're hopeful will go through at the National Assembly. But what we lack vehemently is political will to implement all of these great policies we have. So for me, I'm tired of policies. How about we start implementing the policies we have in place? We have great policies. We have great policies, and we know that as a people. We are a brilliant population. Policies are like rice and stew. It's easy for us to come up with the greatest policies, but we have a very hard time implementing those policies. So what we need is political will, the understanding that a society cannot function if half of it are treated as though they do not exist. Men and women are humans first before whatever sex or gender you identify as. And the sooner we start seeing ourselves as equals, partners on this journey, the better we'll get as a people. So for people aspiring to 2027, the harsh truth or the beautiful truth is that it is going to be another roller coaster. But it is your decision to choose to be a Natasha, or someone who's scamper at the sound of "get out of this room," and you will get a lot of that. I mean, some of us are not in politics yet, and we have a lot of "get out of the room." You can't be here. You can't speak to me. I can't talk to you because you're female or you identify as female. It's going to be hard in 2027, and the journey has just begun. In fact, I think it's going to be more interesting than 2023 with artificial intelligence, with disinformation targeting women. The journey to 2027 is going to be one for the books, and we have to come prepared. I think one last thing I'm going to say is that women and women's group need to equip themselves with all the machineries, artilleries they need. And when I say machineries and artilleries, I don't mean guns or armored tankers. But this is a game, and we need to get our head in the game and play well.
Okay, I want to bring back Peter Akah here and ask the question that I had asked earlier. And what I had asked you earlier, Peter, was, what do you think changed? A few days ago, Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan had sent her notice to the Senate informing them of her decision to resume, seeing as the 6 months had elapsed. They didn't let her in. All of a sudden, they've done a video unsealing the National Assembly. So what do you think has changed between this time?
Has changed is that citizens decided to mobilize. One of the lessons you would also have taken home from the case of Senator Natasha is that it reinforces the knowledge that democracy thrives when citizens participate, and that impunity, injustice, corruption, and criminality in government will continue for as long as the people permit it. Once a majority of the people come together and say enough of this injustice and this level of illegality, it will be enough. Because as Chiamaka rightly said, that there are lots of policies, but the devil is in the detail when it comes to implementation. But I would beg to differ to say that the political will we have today is rather to entrench this system of lawlessness and this structure of criminality. And Nigerians must decide to put their feet on the ground and wake up to know that democracy does not exist in a vacuum. We are the collateral. And that is what people like Senator Natasha stand for. Remember that Senator Natasha, throughout these 6 months, it was not just Uhuru. There was a recall that was put in by the so-called, constituents headed by certain politicians. Do you know that it is easier to recall a senator in Kogi than to vote? The total votes that took Senator Natasha to the Senate were less than 70,000, according to the tribunal, finally. But do you know that within 2 days, INEC and the people who were trying to do the recall to supersede got almost 300,000 signatures or petitions to recall her, meaning it is easier to recall than to vote in Kogi. Remember that Senator Natasha's election, there was even an attack where the road to her own constituency was completely bulldozed down on the eve or the night to the elections. So it has been from one attack to the next. But because the people decided to come out in one voice, and they know the politicians, because the power of the people must always be greater than the people in power. Nigerians must know that this level of injustice and dysfunctionality brings every citizen to their knees as victims. And everybody must wake up and defend and stand for what is right. I commend the people of Kogi Central and Nigerians, and for everybody to know that it did not just come in a vacuum. And even when the notice that was sent saying she should resume, remember that there is also a caveat where they are saying that by the time they resume, the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Bamuru, will move a motion for Senator Natasha to apologize. So they are leaving a window for future mischief. And that is what Nigerians must mobilize to ensure that the resumption is without conditions. Go back and continue your job, represent your people. And moving forward, Nigerians must take the key to know that democracies thrive when citizens participate. When citizens mobilize and insist that we must follow the rule of law, the persons in power have no choice than to follow the rule of law and the will of the people.
Wow, very intense conversation that we've had here with Chiamaka Okafor and Peter Akah. Thank you so much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us. We're hoping that the issues with the Senate and the ability for Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan to dispense her responsibilities as a representative of Kogi Central, that they've come to an end, at least for now, and should be allowed to do her duties. But thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.